Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to this latest webcast that we're bringing you from Travel Weekly as part of our Roadmap to Recovery series. And I'm joined today by three leaders in the travel industry. And that's Julia Bue-Said, who is the Chief Executive of the Advantage Travel Partnership. We've got Paul Cleary, who is the owner and Managing Director of Caribtours. And we have Paul Charles, who is the Chief Executive of the PC Agency. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I collected you all together pretty swiftly on the back of the announcement on Saturday evening by the Prime Minister around the, well, lockdown 2, as it's being referred to. It obviously has serious implications for travel at a time when I think people were feeling a little bit more optimistic. We'd been given some travel corridors. Let's start with you, Julia, because you were straight onto social media with your reaction. I mean, did it come as a total surprise, and what's been the reaction from your members?
Well, I think the surprise was it wasn't a surprise. I think we had all woken up to the news Saturday morning regarding the leaked document, and I think that just added to the anxiety and the frustration and actual anger that I think, well, certainly I was feeling, and I know a lot of my members did. That by the time Boris eventually stood up a few hours later than planned, we actually knew what he was going to say, despite the number of graphs that I still can't get my head around them all. But so I think, yeah, so, you know, not a surprise. I think it was something that has been spoken about for some time. I think clearly we all want to make sure that the virus is contained, and, you know, whether that meant, you know, the lockdown should have happened a few weeks ago. Well, you know, I think that's all for us to keep speculating on. But, you know, from a member's point of view, this is just the final nail in the coffin. It really is. You have, you know, a situation that we know that you've well reported on, where travel agents have been in desperate times over the last, 8 months now. Small glimmer of hope with the travel corridors, particularly Canaries, that came on board a few weeks ago, to the point where agents rejoicing when they made a few bookings. I mean, I've never seen it. I've never seen that or experienced that before. And for it now to be taken away, and actually today, instead of managing new bookings, which they were all doing last week, they are faced with cancellations, refunds again. We're back to square one, which is where we were back in March. There's no light at the end of the tunnel right now. It's real desperate times.
Okay, thank you for that, Julia. Let's just come to you on the front line as well, Paul Cleary. You were presumably feeling a little bit more positive before this announcement, but what does it mean for your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really confused, Liz. I mean, a lockdown 2, that sounds like the worst ever Halloween movie, doesn't it? And that's exactly what we've got. But it's a really confusing picture, because on the one hand, for the last couple of weeks, none of us can pretend we haven't noticed parts of South Yorkshire going into lockdown, parts of Lancashire in the northwest and Greater Manchester. So we've seen all these regional lockdowns. Now, Advantage and Caribtours, we sell nationally around the UK. So I was beginning to wonder how long we could go on with this shutting down more and more of the country without it affecting us. But it's as if you've got two decision-making bodies within government. You've got the people shutting down the country over there, and then you've got people announcing the travel corridors over here. And we've had nothing but good news this last few weeks for the travel corridors. And yeah, business has been flying in October, genuinely has. I think we were 20, Caribtours has been 25% up on last October. And that's incredible. Last October was pre-COVID, right? It was a great month, and we've done 25% more. 68% of that business was late business for travel in November and Christmas, because the population kind of felt that we were coming out of it. So I don't know. I'll tell you what it means for our business. I've got my staff working from 8 o'clock yesterday morning, phoning out to 55 travel agents to handle 55 separate bookings that are all due to travel between Thursday and the 2nd of December, and trying to keep them alive. And, you know, some of those bookings, and Julia will know this is maybe the 4th or 5th time we've amended these bookings. It's so that's what it means for us. I mean, but that's what we're going to do. That's what we're doing, and you know, we'll see where we are at the end of this week.
Okay, Paul, the other Paul, the other Paul just mentioned that you know, it's as if the government is split and there's different people making different decisions and it's all very confusing was the word. I mean, is that your impression? You're quite close to, well, you're quite close to some of these numbers. You've been looking at them with a real fine-tooth comb. So did it come as a surprise to you, or what's your impression?
Well, it's great to hear Paul's stoicism, but I'm afraid this is just a disaster at the moment in the end of the year when there could have been some hope for getting more business in, and it's just turned, as Paul says, into lockdown 2. I call it lockdown limbo. Essentially, you're back in a position where nobody's got any visibility, especially as ministers are disagreeing over their message. This has been a masterclass in how not to communicate one of the most important policy changes of the last year, an about turn from a tier system, which people were just starting to get used to, even if they couldn't understand the minutiae, to a lockdown in effect, which is forcing people to stay at home again, and therefore they're losing confidence and they're not booking. And ministers are split. As we know, it came out of the blue from a meeting on Friday of the core team. The core team are the senior cabinet ministers, Rishi Sunak, Matt Hancock, Michael Gove, Boris Johnson, and other cabinet ministers were not aware on Friday night when the story broke in the Times late in the evening. So it's a disaster from a communications perspective. It's not how you deliver news in a crisis. But crucially for the sector, it yet again puts people in limbo. Should I book? Should I change? Do I cancel flights? Do I run flights as an airline? Do I stay open as a hotel? Do I service business travelers only? But then there are a few of them anyway. It's utter chaos out there this morning, and lots of people who did have bookings are now obviously trading them in.
Yeah, absolutely. So Julia, Paul describes it as chaos, but what have your agent, what's their reaction been like? I know you were tweeting saying that, you know, this is really critical. You were saying, you know, agents are completely falling into the abyss on this. That some of the words you've been using have been very, very strong. So presumably, have you got I know you said you've already seen over half your membership, you know, losing jobs. So what does this mean for your membership and other agents around the country?
It's actually beyond a crisis. I mean, I don't know how I actually don't know how you come back from this now unless there is quick, immediate support. And one of the things that we have been asking and you know, through all the different coalitions and Safe Future Travel that we've been asking for is financial support specific for the industry, because there are nuances. It is very different. We have never recovered, despite the odd travel corridors that have come on. Don't forget, travel corridors have been taken away just as quickly. So every spark of light has gone within a flicker. So financial specific support for the nuances that the travel industry faces. And I know we're very fragmented as an industry, and there are so many different players within that. But specifically for travel agents, you know, travel agents have earned no money. They have no cash in their business. Liquidity is at an all-time negative, let alone at a low. So travel agents today, a significant portion of travel agents today have run out of money. We did a quick poll with Bruce at Travel Gossip over the weekend. 60% of agents already, for those that have responded, will run out of money by the end of this year. That's worse than our initial predictions. It's even worse than what we originally thought. You know, and that includes agents who have borrowed money from family and friends. It includes agents who have taken out, you know, CBILS loans and loans from their bank. This is beyond dire. And the biggest frustration for me in any, you know, we all run businesses, but we have a plan and we plan. Things go sour, you plan. I can see no evidence of an exit strategy to help support the industry. So we haven't even got that. You know, we talk about business travelers. Well, business travelers are not traveling. I mean, I've seen a couple of the comments that have come out this morning. Business travelers are not traveling. Our corporates are not sending their travelers on business trips unless it's essential business like pharmaceuticals, medical, you know, all rigs, etc. And actually, the reason, apart from the obvious, they're not doing that is because they still have to quarantine for most destinations when they come back. So it's beyond dire, Lucy, and no plan. If we had a plan, we can help be part of that recovery process. And right now, there's no strategy from the government around any of the, particularly around the financial support that is needed to urgently support these travel businesses out of this crisis?
I'm afraid to say there is no exit strategy, because Boris Johnson said on Saturday that the plan is to end on December the 2nd. And then within 18 hours, Michael Gove is on Sky News saying, well, actually, it may go on after December the 2nd. So there's no clear, consistent strategy at all yet.
And what does that mean for you, Paul? You just said you've got these 55 bookings between, Thursday and December the 2nd, but could it be that you'll rebook them into December and then, you'll be cancelling them again, or do you think you'll now be nervous to book them this side of Christmas?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it means. But I mean, I think we'll be clear. Paul, you're absolutely right to say Gove comes out and says that, which isn't helpful. But there's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm very conscious that the people watching this webcast will all be travel industry professionals whose livelihoods rely on getting these sales out. We are dealing with the fact that we cannot afford to deal with anything other than the facts that are in front of us now. And at the moment, the information we have, by the time this webcast is broadcast, it could well have changed, but it's 2nd of December. And so, yeah, we're up to the agents of when they can and when they want to go. I think it's increasingly likely that people have had enough and they want to kick it into next year. But I mean, yeah, our job is to keep those bookings alive. And also, it isn't really stoicism on my part, Paul, at all. It's just absolute realism. I make my money. I do everything on selling these holidays and finding a way. And I think the way the government is manhandling this situation is an utter disgrace, but we'll teach them that lesson at the ballot box. But until then, I've got to find a way to stay alive and steer my way through this. And you're absolutely right, Julia. The lack of travel-specific help, the lack of it is also criminal. But I don't think it's coming. I don't think it's coming. And all of the decisions I've been making, and I've made some horrible decisions since the middle of March, have all been decisions that I can make and control on my own. And it is absolutely horrible and it's absolutely brutal. But my biggest worry is that I can't afford to wait for the government to come and help me, because I don't think they are. I don't think they are. I think, Paul, you seem to be, I've been following you, and you've got brilliant comments on the testing and the revisions to quarantine. I think they can help us. I think they can help us, and I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that later on. But in terms of sector-specific help, I'm not holding my breath.
No, I agree.
Okay,
I agree. I don't think there will be.
Okay, and that's, some people have been posting on social since Saturday that, well, now that we are forced to close and there is an international ban, so this is not a voluntary thing now, we are being forced. Does that mean that they will now provide any support? But Paul doesn't think it. You were shaking your head as well, Paul. So you think that's not coming?
No, this is not a chancellor that is overly keen on going down the route of sector-specific support, although there was Eat Out, Help Out, but we'll come back to that. But if he starts going down a particular route with one sector, there are many other sectors crying out for support as well, and gets into a very muddy playing field for a chancellor to do that. He would rather employ a one-size-fits-all solution like the furlough scheme to offer immediate support to help businesses. And obviously that is a lifeline for many, and many are grateful for that. But sector-specific support is not the hallmark of this government. And I think they're quite keen in a way to, sadly, see businesses shake out in some way. They've said not everybody can survive, and it's an impossible position for them to be in because they can't help everybody, and they don't want to go down the route of helping one sector above another. But it's a really grim picture, because the moment they start offering any more support to one particular sector, then you're getting into a position where the numbers are just out of control. They're going to have to tax for years and years and years. There has to be an endpoint at some point, and that's where they are at the moment. They can't give to everybody. Okay.
Julia, did the announcement of the extension of furlough, they're suspending this JSS, bringing back furlough for a month, do you think that was helpful at all. Actually, I think you tweeted it's tokenism, not helpful. So, but presumably some people might find a little bit of help in that, some of your members.
And the reality, and I think at the start it was a lifeline, because you were working through, you were working through your cash. You had furlough there, so it was saving you having to contribute to your payroll costs, if you like. But all businesses that were making cuts had planned already to put, to go through, difficult decisions, as Paul Cleary said, around redundancies, etc. We've all had to do that, and had made their decisions on Friday night, had already delivered that painful news, had put in place a process whereby they were going to use the new JSS scheme. So what the furlough does, it doesn't provide a lifeline. It certainly doesn't provide a lifeline for members or agents. It saves a bit of cost if you were keeping staff on under what was going to be the new scheme that never got introduced. So it saves you a bit of cost, but it's not a lifeline. So
you're saying if you were going to make people redundant, you would have already made them redundant because you knew it was coming to an end. So it's only those who you might have kept on.
Absolutely right. So it saves you a bit of cost. So it gives you a month reprise. And I've seen, obviously, there are grants that have come in, and I think now we're out of that tiering system. The grants will be available like they were at the beginning of this pandemic for lots of other businesses. But again, there are nuances in wording, so we just need to work through some of that. At the time I came on the call, there wasn't enough guidelines around some of the grant wording as to whether or not every travel business would be entitled to that. Last time we saw business travel, for example, exempt because they weren't servicing customers as walk-in trade. So we need to understand what those nuances are and clarification around those schemes. So I think it is, from my point of view, it's tokenism. It's not a lifeline. You've run out of money, you've run out of money. Furlough makes no difference. It provides a bit of a saving on what you thought you were going to outlay, but doesn't really change any decisions that the business has been forced into making.
Okay, and would you agree with that, Paul? I know you just said you had to make some very difficult decisions over the last few months, as everybody has. Did this extension of furlough, does that make any difference to your plan?
Yeah, it does, but it's all nuts, Lucy. It's all nuts because, 10 days ago we were working on job support scheme. I've got to tell you, I'm fairly bright. It took me 3 days to work out how it's going to work, the job support scheme. I finally clicked how it's going to work, and then Sunak changed it, didn't he? He changed it again, unexpectedly.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, we had that. It was made more generous, wasn't it?
But yeah, and he does all of his changing his mind in public. So my staff learn about it at the same time as I do.
Yeah.
You're scrabbling tips. We finally processed that, and we've had all of our discussion about how we can make that work. And no sooner did we have those discussions, and everyone around the country had those discussions on Friday, right, Julia? That it then changes to furlough. Yeah, furlough helps, but it comes a little bit too late for those people who've left employment because they were reaching the end of furlough. So I feel terribly sorry for all of the people around the country, travel or not, who left their employment on the 31st of October or the 30th of October, only to find that maybe they could have stayed in furlough for another month or two. But it helps a little bit, Lucy. It helps a little bit, but it's a little bit inconsistent, and it's quite confusing the way it's been miscommunicated.
Which adds to your frustration, I'm sure. Paul mentioned there that what would help us is testing, vaccines, all those kind of things, that could help us. And Boris did say in his announcement that there are millions of rapid tests coming in weeks. He often sort of says these things, doesn't he? I think as a kind of a sweetener when he's delivered some really bad news. Do you have any intel, Paul, Charles, on where we are with testing, and are these rapid tests really coming in weeks that might help us?
Yes, and thanks, Paul, for your kind comments. But yes, there is hope. There is some hope. It's just further out, and that's the problem. The government was hoping that the technology would be good enough, actually, by the beginning of October to introduce a much wider testing regime, not just for travel, but for daily life. And obviously the technology just hasn't quite delivered yet, but it is almost there. It's on the edge at the moment, and it's just waiting for licensing and endorsement. And it's really LAMP test technology, as it's called, that is making a real difference now, delivering results within 20 minutes to half an hour, delivering saliva testing not just swab testing, which a lot of people don't like because it's so invasive. All this is there. It's just, can it be ramped up? And I'm actually quite optimistic that within 6 weeks, we will see a traveller test to release system. Test to release will essentially be, you come back from a trip from a high risk area, you will spend up to 7 days. It's not agreed yet at 7 days, but up to 7 days in quarantine. And then you take a test on day 8 and be released, as it were, from quarantine. Now, I know it's not the be all and end all because it's still quarantine, but a week quarantine is much better than 14 days quarantine. So it's coming. Yeah. The industry's just got to hang on for it. And that's the problem. We're in this limbo. I call it lockdown limbo, because essentially we're just waiting and trusting the scientists to deliver this sort of technology. It was needed yesterday. And there are a lot of companies, as Julia's said, who won't survive that next 4 to 6 week period because they're so running out of cash.
So to that point, Julia, what advice are you giving to your members who are pretty desperate? Because we've had people on here, some of them saying, look, just hibernate your business, just keep your costs absolutely down, do something else. We've got all these examples of agents taking other jobs just to, you know, so they're not going to close their business, but they're just going to put it into hibernation. Then we've got other people saying, no way, hibernation is an absolute sort of fast track to absolute, you know, collapse of your business. You've got to sell your way out of this. You've got to do, I mean, and Paul was saying there, you've got to just deal with the cards that you're dealt, and you've got to just get on with it and try and find your way through it. So what advice do you give agents?
I think the reality is, from a business point of view, it's very difficult to sell your way out of it. I think one thing that we have learned over the last few months is that you have to be able to move really quickly depending on what's happening in the marketplace, and your tone and sentiment has to go with it. So you have to read customer sentiment, you have to read social media, you have to know what the mood is, you know, across the consumer space, and react accordingly. And that would be my advice. So there's no, you know, what's right today is different tomorrow in terms of your messaging. In terms of your business, I honestly think everyone has to be looking at some form of hibernation, because right now that's what's going to save your business. You've got to be trimming your costs. I think we're talking 8 months later, and I know from a lot of the members I've spoken to, they're at that place already where they've had to trim back their costs as much as they possibly can to see themselves through it, and be ready as and when, be ready to move with what consumers want. And as Paul Charles said there, testing is our way out of it. Testing really is the only way out of this. So we need to make sure we have a world-beating, in all sense of the word, world-beating that allows people to travel comfortably, safely, and releases them from quarantine. That is going to come at some point. So that's our holy grail. That's the only way out of it. But you have to cut your costs. You have to hibernate your business. But as we've been, you know, even from an Advantage point of view, you know, our messaging this morning will be different. I know it will be different to this afternoon, how we communicate, because you've got to, everything moving so quickly. You've just got to read the news very, very carefully. And one wrong message, you know, if I'm advising members today, you know, sell, and, you know, you'd get, you know, rightly so, consumers will be going, well, hold on a minute, I don't really think right now is the time to travel. So you've just got to be very careful with how you're positioning your messages. And, you know, we all have a responsibility to do the right thing and make sure that we're in a place to do that. Yeah.
I mean, Julia's just pointed out that now, I guess, given Saturday's announcement isn't the right time to travel. But Paul, your figures would show that there is pent-up demand, like nobody's business. You know, people obviously do want to travel when they can, because if you've got figures that were better than last October, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Be honest though, Lucy, you don't want to see my April to September figures. They weren't so pretty, but it's listen, there is pent-up demand, and I think we're all in an impossible situation, and it's clearly, you know, state the obvious, it's a global pandemic. It's a problem that affects every single person on the planet. And I think the advantage we all have with this situation, Julia, and it's a very obvious thing to say, is on this occasion, all of our customers know that it's not our fault. That it's a pandemic, and they watch this shit show every time Boris Johnson opens his mouth and gives a new policy decision. So they know it's not our fault. And I think where we're doing well, relatively speaking, and I think a lot of your members are, Julia, because 80% of my business comes from agents like Advantage members, is they trust us. And I think, you know, it's been said 100 times before, but they trust us. They trust us. They trust us to give them advice, which is honest advice, which is reliable advice based on the facts that we have. And I think that's all we can do. I mean, we're ladling on the emotion and the emotional connection and the trust with our agents and our customers. Yeah, demand there. All these people, I mean, let's talk about it. That decision was made last Saturday after the wettest half term ever. I mean, Lucy, you've got children. I don't know about you, Paul, but Julia certainly has. I have. That was the most miserable 7 days of my life.
It really was.
Yeah, let's not be surprised. There is demand. Our customers have missed their summer holidays. They missed their Easter holiday. They missed the summer. October at home was a living hell. They're desperate to go away. Most of my business comes in the winter. So there is demand, and it is going to come back. It's making sure that everyone's still standing. Isn't that right, Julia, when it does come back? Because
and you're obviously doing the right thing. You're refunding customers without any kind of question. But we've had Michael O'Leary speaking already this morning, Paul, saying, well, claiming he's already refunded absolutely everybody since March, but now saying he's not going to be refunding any flights in November. He's gone out quite clearly and said for this next lockdown he won't be refunding. So I mean, that it's difficult, isn't it? Because some of the travel industry, and we do get tarred with a brush, even though there are some people who've been behaving brilliantly, gone above and beyond through this, but there's a few people that sometimes, you know, consumers then take that view.
Well, you treat your customers in the way you want them to treat you. And if you look after them and you do deliver the refunds when you should deliver them, they'll stick with you and they'll be loyal customers for the future. And that's a mantra that Ryanair has struggled with for some time. So I don't think the approach has necessarily been any different today from Mike O'Leary, who runs a great airline, but they're profitable for a reason, highly profitable for a reason. But he's going to struggle to run 30% of his business during November. Other airlines like EasyJet have already said they're cutting back on flights. And yeah, airlines certainly to some extent have been the bad boys during this because of their refund delays and dithering. But that's because they've been trying to survive. And obviously everyone in the sector has been trying to survive in their own very different way. But withholding money from customers is something that will not be forgotten. And that regime, the whole process, as you know, we've talked about before, is going to have to change in the future. I think the thing now is we're in this limbo land for the next few months of on and off lockdowns, potentially release before Christmas and then lockdown again potentially after New Year. We're going to have this uncertainty for some time. And I really want to see the sector look forward to the post-April period now. I think there's no point in sort of, you know, constantly us calling for APD cuts, passenger duty cuts, or calling for sector-specific support. I think it'd be much better to look for April onwards, get people thinking about that period, get people booking now for that period, as long as they have the confidence that they'll get a refund if needed. And also actually asking the government, instead of doing sector-specific support, to almost have a campaign ready to go from January onwards, when there will be more confidence about testing and vaccines, to have a campaign that supports the industry and gets people booking. And I think government money would be better spent, as it was encouraging people to take staycations during the summer. It would be better for the government to have a major campaign from January to April onwards, key booking period, to get people booking. And then at least we would all know in the sector that there is this wave of money that could start to come through from January onwards.
Okay, so and you think that's something we could start lobbying or campaigning for as an industry?
Absolutely, because I think that's something that they've already shown they're prepared to do with the staycation campaign this summer. Now let's see them promote overseas trips as well.
Okay, and so is that something that you would support, Julia, and your membership?
Yeah, of course. I mean, anything that helps encourage consumer demand and brings business back to our members, absolutely. I guess, yeah, I suppose from my point of view, I think we saw you know, we saw the travel corridors shambles that came in. I think we saw the quarantine that went with that. You know, I've just not seen anything from the government that encourages me to think that they recognise the importance of, let's call us one industry, you know, our global aviation. I've just not seen that. I know there are lots of meetings and I know there are a lot of discussions that happen, but actually, is the willingness there? You know, are we really going to get the government? And actually, is it the government to do it? And maybe it's something the industry should be working together to try and champion rather than rely on the government. And obviously, the government are quite keen to push back to the industry, you know, whenever possible. So maybe as an industry, that's something that we need to think about. How do we work together to encourage and give confidence? I guess that's to give confidence to the great travel sector and travel industry that we are, and let's not forget, you know, pre this we were world class. You know, we were a travel industry that was looked upon from, you know, various different competitors around the globe as being well beaten. You know, unfortunately, we are now second best to, I think, you know, Paris has overtaken us now. So we've got to try and get ourselves back to that place. But I think the government will be relying on, my view, the industry to get us back there. But anything that encourages confidence, then clearly that's something that we would wholeheartedly support.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I think we're probably close to time. I'm dying to know where you've been going, Paul. You've been jumping off that chair left and
right. No, like every other cliche with lockdown, we got a puppy and he was doing something unspeakable out of shot there, and I had to go and deal with it.
I just had to know because it's very unlike you, but you were jumping left, right, and centre. Listen, you know,
yeah.
Thank you for. All right. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time, all of you. Really great to hear your views. And as I said, let's hope we can all get through this next lockdown and you know, move on to better times. But thank you to Julia from Advantage, to Paul from Caribtours, and to Paul from the PC Agency. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.